In this video, we will talk about a new feature that has been introduced in Nerdio Manager for Enterprise version 3.4 that has to do with the placement of ephemeral OS disks into the VM's temp disk location. So as a recap of ephemeral OS disks are free in Azure, meaning they carry no storage cost that's associated with them, and they're also extremely fast. And that is because these disks reside on the same physical host, the same physical server that is running the VM, as opposed to being stored on shared storage, where it is then mounted to the VM when it boots up. So ephemeral disks are really useful because they are both faster and because they incur no storage cost. The one significant limitation that has been true up until this point is that the ephemeral OS disks had to be placed into the disk cache area of a VM. And because the entire operating system of an image that is used to deploy a VM must be able to fit into the disk cache, that meant that for 128 gigabyte or even 64 gigabyte image sizes, you needed a fairly large VM. So in the case of 128, I believe that had to be a D4 or maybe even a D8 machine, or basically a 4 or an 8 core machine in order to contain that image in its ephemeral OS disk. Microsoft introduced with some of the newer VM instances, like the V4s and the V5s of the D series, for example, the ability to place the ephemeral OS disk in the location of where the temporary disk of that VM is placed, rather than in a disk cache. And what this allows you to do is it gives you more flexibility around the size of the image that you can use. Let's look at a specific example. So let's go ahead and create a new host pool, and let's choose an image. For example, let's go ahead and just choose a Windows 11 with Office Pro Plus Gen 2 image. And as you can see, if I simply select a D2S V3 and I look at my list of disks, ephemeral OS disk is going to be grayed out. That is because my disk size or my image size is 128 gigabytes, but my OS cache placement only gives me 50 gigabytes of usable space. So this 128 gigabytes cannot fit into this space. Even if I were to use a reduced image size, I have one here that's 64 gigabytes. Still, what you'll notice is that it is not big enough to fit into 50 gigabytes because I'm using OS cache placement. However, if I choose a newer VM instance, for example, a D2 DSV4, same number of CPU cores and same amount of RAM as the previous one that I've selected, what you'll notice is if we scroll to the top of the list, we now have an additional option that's called temp disk placement, and it is available. And the reason it's available is because my image is 64 gigabytes and my disk size, my temporary disk size placement is up to 75 gigabytes. So I can now use a 2-core, 8 gigabyte of RAM VM with an ephemeral OS disk, something that was not possible previously, and you had to use a much larger VM with more cores. So with this new capability, we're just expanding the amount of options available, the number of options available to use ephemeral disks for cost and performance efficiency with smaller VM sizes, which is oftentimes where they need to be used, especially in case of personal desktops and just environments that don't need VMs with very large number of CPU cores. Hope you found this useful, and I look forward to seeing you in future videos.